You could walk into any room in the ancient world and immediately spot the richest person in it. Not by their jewelry, not by their clothes, not by the guards standing behind them. By their body. The wealthiest person in the room was almost always the biggest person in the room, and everybody knew exactly what that meant. Today, we've flipped this completely. Expensive food is salads and protein bowls. Rich people have personal trainers and nutritionists and carefully managed calorie deficits. But for roughly 10,000 years of human history, it worked the complete opposite way. Body fat was a financial statement, a walking, breathing announcement that you had consistent access to more food than your body actually needed. And in a world where most people went to bed genuinely uncertain whether they'd eat tomorrow, that announcement hit harder than a gold necklace or a marble house, sometimes even harder. Here's the basic math, because the basic math explains everything. In ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, ancient China, ancient Mesopotamia, in every civilization that existed before factories and machines, the overwhelming majority of people were farmers or physical laborers, and their entire lives revolved around a single terrifying question: will there be enough? Enough grain, enough bread, enough olives or lentils or whatever the local staple happened to be, enough calories to get through today, wake up tomorrow, and do it again. The average Egyptian farmer during the Old Kingdom consumed around 3,500 calories a day just to sustain the physical workload. That sounds like a lot. It wasn't. Not when the harvest came up short, not when the Nile flooded at the wrong time, not when the local tax collector got greedy. There was almost no margin. One bad season and people starved. Now look at the person running that village. The nobleman, the government official, the temple priest. He was not farming, he was managing, deciding, collecting, and eating the surplus that everyone else's labor produced. His professional life involved sitting, thinking, attending dinners where important decisions were made over roasted duck and honeyed figs. He was consuming far more calories than he was burning, consistently, visibly, over the years, and it showed. That wasn't a side effect of his wealth, that was the proof of it. Fat was stored surplus, and surplus, having more than you needed, was the single thing that separated the people who ran the ancient world from the people who built it. Think about that for a second. In a world where most people weren't sure they'd eat tomorrow, carrying extra weight on your body was basically walking around with your bank account written on your face. Everyone could see it. Everyone understood it. No explanation required. Ancient Egyptian tomb paintings show this with almost uncomfortable clarity. Pharaohs and nobles are painted with round faces, heavy arms, and visible weight in their cheeks and chests. Their servants and farmers in the exact same paintings are lean and angular. Thin, clean lines, bodies that carried nothing extra because nothing extra existed. The artists weren't making a stylistic choice. They were painting exactly what they saw every single day. A bigger body meant your land produced more than you could eat. It meant you never had to do physical work yourself. It meant your grain stores were full during the famines that were killing your neighbors. It meant you had survived things that killed other people. It meant you had won. Now, if ancient Egypt established body fat as a status symbol, ancient Rome picked up that idea and threw an 8-course dinner party with it. Roman banquets were called the convivium, and they weren't really about food. Well, they were about food, but they were also financial performances, conducted lying down on couches between bites of something so expensive that every single guest immediately understood what it cost. The host who served the most extraordinary meal was sending one very clear message: I have so much money that spending it like this feels completely normal to me. The menu told the whole story. Rare fish imported from the furthest seas, peacock, which cost more than most Romans earned in an entire year, and the centerpiece of the whole thing, fattened dormice, small animals kept in special clay pots, fed nothing but walnuts for weeks, just to make them as plump and expensive as possible before serving. A dish that existed for no reason except to prove the host could afford it. Here's why fattened animals signaled wealth so perfectly. To fatten anything, a dormouse, a goose, a pig, you needed surplus grain to feed it beyond what was strictly necessary. You needed time to raise it past the point where a hungrier person would have already eaten it. You needed space. You needed security. Every single one of those things cost money. Putting a fattened animal on the table was putting your financial statement on the table. Your guests weren't just eating dinner, they were eating proof. The Romans understood the connection between food and status completely, and some of them took it so far that looking back now, the only word for it is unhinged. Apicius was the most notorious eater in all of Roman history. He spent his entire fortune, every last coin, hunting down the rarest ingredients, hosting the most spectacular banquets, and eating at a level that made other wealthy Romans look ordinary by comparison. He wasn't just rich, he was performatively, aggressively, competitively rich, and the dinner table was where he proved it every single night. Then one day, he sat down and did the math. His fortune was running out. He could still afford to eat well, just not at his level, like a regular rich person, not a legendary one. So he poisoned himself. He decided that death was better than a smaller food budget. This is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. The man calculated his remaining wealth, decided the number wasn't big enough, and chose to exit rather than downgrade. That one story tells you everything about how completely the ancient world had fused eating with identity. It wasn't just what you ate, it was who you were. Rome's relationship with food was also reliably, consistently hypocritical, and when you look at it closely, it gets funny fast. Roman philosophers wrote long essays about the virtues of moderation. Senators gave speeches praising simplicity and self-control, then went home to 8-course dinners served by 20 slaves. The gap between what Romans preached and what Romans actually ate was so wide and so perfectly repeated across centuries that the hypocrisy basically became its own cultural tradition. But here's the thing, Rome was not even the extreme version. Because while Romans were turning competitive eating into a political art form, other cultures around the world had developed something far more structured, something that honestly makes Roman banquets look almost restrained. In parts of West and Central Africa, among the Efik people of what is now Nigeria, and across communities in Cameroon, Ghana, and Senegal, there was a practice called fattening rooms. A young woman preparing for marriage would spend weeks, sometimes months, in a private and secluded space before her wedding day. She would eat as much as possible, move as little as possible. Attendants would massage her with oils and feed her continuously. The entire purpose was to help her gain as much weight as she could before the ceremony. Because arriving at your wedding visibly, undeniably well-fed wasn't just considered attractive, it was proof to her husband's family, to the entire community, that her own family had the resources to care for her properly. Her body was the dowry statement. Nobody inside those rooms understood what was happening as punishment or harm. It was understood as the complete opposite, the highest possible preparation for marriage, a gift, a luxury, an investment in a daughter's future. These practices continued for centuries until something happened that quietly erased the logic behind them. Western nations got rich enough that food became cheap and easy to access. Suddenly, eating a lot cost almost nothing, but hiring a personal trainer, seeing a nutritionist, and having enough free time to exercise regularly, that got expensive. The meaning of body size flipped completely. Thinness became the new signal of wealth and discipline. Heaviness became associated with poverty. China tells the same story, just with different brushstrokes. The ideal Chinese emperor, as painted in royal court art across hundreds of years, was not a lean warrior. He was substantial, dignified, built like someone who had never once gone without, because he genuinely never had. And the language itself backed this up. In classical Chinese, the word for prosperity carries associations of fullness, roundness, and abundance. The word for poverty carries associations of emptiness and hollowness. The culture didn't just believe that a full body meant a full life. It built that belief directly into the words ordinary people used every single day. In imperial China, A government official's body wasn't just about him, it was about everyone. When a court official visibly gained weight during a period of good governance, people saw it as proof that the whole country was doing well. Strong harvests, flowing trade, peace that had lasted long enough for surplus to build up. A thin official meant things were hard. A round official meant the world was working the way it was supposed to. The man's body was the government's annual report, written in fat, published in public. This thinking spread through sculpture and temple art across the entire continent and left behind one of the most recognizable images on Earth. The laughing, round-bellied figure that most Westerners call the Happy Buddha is not, in fact, the historical Buddha. The real Buddha was depicted as lean and deeply disciplined, a man who had given up everything, including food. The round, laughing figure is someone else entirely. His name was Budai, a Chinese folk monk who became associated with abundance, good fortune, and the blessing of having more than enough. His enormous belly is prosperity made physical, visible, touchable. People rub it for luck. They are literally reaching out and touching a symbol of financial security, hoping some of it transfers to them. The belly is a savings account. Touch it and hope for the best. Chinese food tells the same story. The dishes considered lucky, celebratory, and appropriate for important occasions are almost always rich, fatty, and abundant. Pork belly, braised duck, whole fish, sticky rice with sweet fillings. These are not careful foods. These are not foods eaten by people watching what they spend. These are foods that say one thing clearly: we had more than enough and we didn't need to be careful with it. Every feast was making an argument. Every dish was a financial statement served on a plate. And then there was ancient Greece, which looked at all of this and disagreed. While almost every other civilization on Earth was running the fat equals power system, Greek athletic culture developed a completely different answer to the same question. What does a wealthy body look like? In ancient Greece, upper-class men were expected to be seriously, visibly, dedicatedly athletic. The gymnasium was a formal social institution. The word itself comes from the Greek word gymnos, meaning unclad, because they exercised naked, which is its own remarkable cultural detail that we're going to acknowledge and move past quickly. The gymnasium was where you trained, competed, and were seen by the right people. Showing up and being seen was the whole point. The Olympic Games were not primarily a sporting event. They were a public display of what having free time looked like. Here's why that matters. To compete in the ancient Greek Olympics, you didn't need an entry fee. You needed months of dedicated training, travel costs, and the complete freedom to spend a huge chunk of your life doing absolutely nothing except preparing your body for competition. That freedom was the expensive part. A slave couldn't build an Olympic body, not because they lacked the physical ability, but because every single hour of their day belonged to someone else. A poor farmer couldn't do it. A craftsman couldn't do it. The athletic physique required free time, consistent access to good food, and complete liberation from physical labor. It was a luxury product. It just looked like discipline. So ancient Greece ended up running two competing status bodies at the same time. The round body of the feasting aristocrat, wealth displayed through eating more than enough, and the muscled body of the gymnasium aristocrat, wealth displayed through having more free time than anyone else. Both were expensive. Both were impossible without significant resources. They looked like complete opposites. They were making the same argument in different directions. The only body that signaled nothing, no wealth, no status, no power whatsoever, was the lean, work-worn body of the person who actually built and grew and produced everything. That body communicated one thing and one thing only: I have no surplus, not of food, not of time, not of anything at all. Greek writers noticed this and found it genuinely funny. The great comedy writer Aristophanes built entire scenes around the contrast between the overfed and the underfed, the man whose belly entered the room before the rest of him, in the man whose ribs you could count from across the street. Not to be cruel, but because the body was the most immediately readable economic signal in a world without bank statements, without tax records, without any of the invisible financial tools that allow modern wealth to stay hidden from view. Ancient wealth could not hide. It lived on the body of the person who had it.